bill that are commendable. Let me just look here this. There's certain aspects of the bill that are commendable as it relates to, sorry, the Cybercrime Bill, not security. There are certain aspects of it that are commendable as it relates to providing protection from cyberbullying, as it relates to pornography, etc. But there are also some aspects of the bill that raise grave concerns for the public, because there are aspects of it that can be perceived to be overly broad, or obscure or vague in the languaging, which we've seen, I would say, quite a bit of that in some of the recent bills that have been brought before the House. The wording has been very, very broad, very vague, very obscure in some sections. So there's certain things that are not being addressed in detail, and that has raised some concern. Other aspects of concern is that it is potentially infringing on fundamental rights, particularly as it relates to the freedom of expression and the freedom of speech. As a result of some of these concerns, we wanted to have this discussion, in particularly, as I said before, as it relates to the creatives, and that's straight across the board. And we will get into some of those specific questions as we move along tonight as well. So whether you are a singer, a calypsonian, a reggae artist, a spoken word artist, a film producer, because we've even seen in a neighboring country where the talk show host was arrested for the views of somebody that called in on that program as well. And the fines that are attached to this bill are very, very hefty, very, very high fines that we see that are attached to this bill. So tonight I am joined by, it's not a large panel, but it's a quite esteemed panel, quite knowledgeable. It gives me pleasure to introduce and to welcome attorney at law, Miss Lynette Eastmond, who apart from being an attorney at law, she is heavily invested in the creative sector as well, and has been for a number of years. I can tell you in the establishment of BACA, Barbados Association of Creatives and Artists, we got a lot of advice and assistance from Lynette in that process, to which we are eternally grateful. Our other panelist this evening is none other than the General, Caswell Franklyn. You would know him as trade unionist. And these two panelists are well equipped to answer not only my questions, but to answer any questions that you may have concerning these bills. So without further ado, let me just say good evening and welcome to Ms. Lynette Eastmond, and good evening to you, Brother Caswell Franklyn. Good evening and welcome to the discussion. Right. Feel free to, I can see, yeah, there you go.
Thank you very much. When you said esteem, I thought it had kicked me off. That floored me a little bit there, but
okay. Welcome, and it is a pleasure to have you this evening. You have a wealth of knowledge on several topics and issues, and we are sure you are more than capable of helping us to ventilate this discussion this evening. I would see Lynette is there. Lynette, you can open your mic.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm happy to be here and look forward to the discussion.
Okay.
Very good night.
Just want to give you both just a few minutes just to do a general overview as it relates to the Cybercrime Bill before we actually start to ask you some questions. Caswell, you can go first. Just a general overview.
I always thought this first, but if you insist. Thanks again. My problems with the Cybercrime Bill is is that people keep saying there are good things about it, and that we should, there's some good aspects of it. The good aspects of this bill are already in legislation elsewhere. There might be a bit of tidying up in the language, but all these provisions that you're talking about, except for cyberbullying,
Right.
or child grooming, even that, there was, you can interpret section 14 to include child grooming, section 14 of the Computer Misuse Act. So it isn't that we didn't have legislation in place. It is I think somebody's trying to do a fast one on us. Legislation is there. Most of the things that people are saying are good and that we need them, they were already there. The problem that I have is that the new provisions, which have become so punitive, and I think they're trying to scare people into silence. And that is where I have a difficulty with. Like, for instance, if you look at section 13, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I always find it in the auditor. Section 13 of the Computer Misuse Act, that speaks to pornography, child pornography and that kind of stuff. That was just since 2015.
Right.
So it is not, we didn't have it. So when you hear two members of parliament getting up and saying, if you oppose the Cybercrime Bill, you're supporting
Child abuse.
child pornography and that kind of stuff, that is to shame people into agreeing with their behavior, when in fact that is the farthest thing from the truth as you can find. So I don't, mind you, I'm not here as a political person right now. I'm not really amateur unionist, and I deal with that. But if I see things that are going off the rail, and I will speak about it. And this is why I am here. And thank you for having me, because I hear too much mispat. What I will do, however, is since these are short remarks, we will get into the meat of the matter when we get down further inside.
Right.
Where I want to scare the creatives, because they seem not to believe that they're going. Some of them seem not to be effective, but they're going to be.
Yeah, agree. Thanks, Caswell. Over to you, Lynette. Any opening thoughts that you want to share with us?
Okay, just a few comments. Now, I guess one of the things that maybe acts as kind of a barrier in terms of individuals actually zooming in on what is happening with the bill is that it's called a cybercrime bill. And we know that recently there were, many of us had instances where we knew of incidents at government institutions where they had been hacked and where people lost information. Or if you had made an application to some of these institutions, the application was lost and you had to start all over because there had been some hacking. So I guess then people might think, oh, you need to have legislation to address this. But there is a discrete provision dealing specifically with sensitive information held by government, etc. So these other provisions aren't addressing that. These other provisions are for the public at large. So sometimes when individuals, I guess, hear the discussion about computer systems, they immediately think of large servers located somewhere and that they don't have any large servers, so it doesn't affect them. But what they're really looking at are devices. And we know that over time, the devices became more and more sophisticated.
Yeah.
So your telephone is a computer system or part of a computer system. So the cell phones and the tablets and all these different things, the legislation addresses those. So it means now that you're sharing images, sharing songs, and quite often individuals share these things. So if Apache does a song and he sends it out, he sends it to me, I might just immediately share it before I listen to it, because you're trying to make a contribution in terms of assisting the artist. And it's a very simple thing to do, but it can make a big difference if you just share it with your friends even before you listen to the whole thing. So I think a lot of us do that. So it means then that all of these incidents of sharing songs, sharing memes, sharing cartoon like figures, etc., all of those things are being covered by the legislation. One of the other things too is that compared with current legislation, the fines are quite high. The penalties are high. Everything seems to be around $7,000. Is it 7,000 or 7 years?
17,000. Yeah.
Or 7 years in prison?
Yeah.
So these are criminal offenses with very serious fines attached to them. So if you look at the Offenses Against the Persons Act, which is a criminal piece of legislation, you would find that at summary level, which is at the magistrate's court, you would see that the fines are like $2,500. So, so like, in fact, the magistrates currently don't have jurisdiction to deal with some of these penalties. Like those 7 years imprisonment, those are usually indictable offenses. So it makes you wonder, it seems out of, it seems to not be in keeping at all with what we usually do. So, so why is that? So even if you have the legislation, why are the penalties so high? Why would you be thinking, now obviously they're a maximum of 7 years, a maximum of 7,000. But why would you be thinking of locking up somebody for 7 years for sharing a photograph that makes me feel uncomfortable? So, so that's the issue. What's the reasoning behind all of this?
Right. And based on what you say there, you're pretty much saying that this bill affects us all. It's not for a select few or for people with large servers somewhere in a room locked away.
No, it affects everybody.
With a cell phone.
Anybody with a cell phone.
Everybody has a cell phone connected to the internet.
Everybody. So it affects everybody.
Yeah. All right. So I would say let's start from scratch and then build and go from there. I like where you took it, Lynette, to identify that it affects everybody. Caswell made it pretty clear as well, pretty clean. Anybody with a cell phone, then this affects you. My first question to you guys would be, what is cybercrime? When we hear the word cybercrime, what does that mean? What is it?
Well, I think they're simply trying to address let's say activity that the legislature believes warrants imprisonment and or a penalty, which is done via the internet.
Yeah.
But bear in mind that human beings have been doing these things all the time. Whatever the offense, it doesn't become worse because it's being done via the internet.
Right.
So from the beginning of time, I was going to say Marjorie, but John would be talking to Paul and say, wait, you hear that such and such a thing happen, or you hear that somebody do such and such a thing, without knowing if it is true or not. But
Right.
he would share that information. And the information was spread all over Barbados. By the time you leave St. Philip and get down to St. Lucie, somebody would be asking if you hear about it. And, you know, so that's been going on from the beginning of time. But we never thought that for doing that, we would lock up somebody for 7 years. But it is just that it's being done via the internet now.
That is all. That's all it means. It's a crime. You know the space between computers. They call it cyberspace, right?
Mhm.
So any crime connected on cyberspace is cybercrime. Mind you, some of the things that happening on cyberspace that you do on cyberspace in this bill, if you do it without going on cyberspace, you go down the road in the crowd. They are not criminal. But if you do it in cyberspace, that doesn't make sense. Like, for instance, suppose I go down the road one day and I said to a group of people, you know, the Prime Minister is not already a lawyer. She never practiced. She never passed. She never qualified. Whether that is true or not, and it is true, whether it is true or not, and her feelings are hurt, this bill says that I can go to jail for 7 years. Now, I said that, and I can say that publicly down the road in the crowd, and nobody can touch me, because that is a fact. But if I say it, but and section, well, clause, because it's still a clause right now, because it's not passed yet. So clause 19.3 says that is true or false, you know? So if something is true, you cannot defame some person with the truth.
Right.
But with this bill, if it is the truth, you can cause embarrassment, you know, and that is the big difference between this. You are going to make me a criminal for saying something that is true, right? Or if I subject you to embarrassment, ridicule, contempt, I can face $70,000 or 7 years in jail, and I do not. I didn't breach the law as it stood today.
Right.
If I do it on a computer, yes. But the dangerous thing about this is that, let's say you say something like that is true, and I record it, and I send it out. I would have just aided and abetted you and sent out this thing on the computer. So you too, even though you had no intention of putting it on the internet, you didn't do it yourself. It is you. Just like the guy in Guyana.
Right.
He did not facilitate, he only facilitated. And according to the act, it is clause 22 of this cybercrime thing says that if you aid and abet a person to commit an offense of this act, you are guilty. Right? So your song man, the man who helps you with doing your song, your
Producers.
you got working in the background.
Yeah.
You are there singing. You are not concerned about what's happening in the background there, what is going on in the back with you, because you got technical people behind there. But those technical people are aiding and abetting you in the commission of an offense under this act. So they are guilty, and they can suffer the same penalties as you. The guy in Guyana, similar provision. He had a talk show, but he has a talk show, and he aided and abetted people who wanted to cut off the president's head, and he get arrested, even though he said, look, he tried to distance himself from anything like that. No, he would have committed an offense. So and that is what the creatives must be careful about, because right now you can go there and you remember you guys get the tents and you sing some things and people make fun. But if that fun now reaches the point where you hurt my feelings. I'm embarrassed by it.
Right.
You got people to laugh at me and I suffer humiliation. Section 20. 19, sorry, 19. You humiliate me. You want to tell you about somebody. That happens all the time. But it isn't a crime when you do it in the tent. But when it gets broadcast on the internet, then it's a crime.
So would you say that this crime is far more severe? Well, Lynette, let me ask you this, because I remember we had a panel discussion. I think it was last year. You were part of the panel when we had a panel of lawyers, and we were looking at the Defamation Act as it relates to Calypso and the Calypso taint. How would you compare this bill with the Defamation Act?
Well, for most defamation cases, they tend to be civil in nature, even if you were going to bring an action against somebody. So there's no fear of imprisonment. There's no fear of being treated like a criminal, having a record, that kind of thing. If anything, if the person is successful, you would compensate them through damages. You would pay them money. So making these offenses criminal is really very serious. No. So you know, when you're convicted of a criminal offense, it affects your police certificate of character.
Yeah.
It might affect your ability to travel. All of these things. So to make them to criminalize the sharing of information. I mean, I must say that I used to say that, or I probably do still say that I know people receive information and quite often they share it without giving any thought to whether it's true or not. They just share it because they think their friend will find it interesting. So in a case like that now, because of the fact that the person could simply feel intimidated by it or something like that. So I was actually thinking about I was thinking about calypsos. And you know, when you're saying that a calypso is a great calypso, you would say that there's biting social commentary.
Yeah, biting lyrics.
Biting lyrics. So biting lyrics now can land you in prison. So if you think about, I was thinking about Mr. T, for example, by Grainer.
Right.
Where I mean the entire song. But then there's the part that he says, I gonna rip your pants. I gonna make you dance. You gonna feel that I as a nest of ants. I gonna milk your goat. I gonna sink your boat. You know what that imagery mean if you ever step in an ant's nest.
Yeah.
So when somebody is saying this about you, you're bound to feel intimidated. You're bound to feel embarrassed. All kinds of things. And the person, everybody knew who the person was that he was talking about. It wasn't any secret. So it means that a calypso like that now, that gone through the Edos as far as I can see.
Yeah, like Jack, don't want me to build on my beach.
Yeah.
We're talking about, you know? So the same thing, your calypso never gonna be like hymns.
Yeah, you know, and that was the whole point about those kind of calypsos, where you could use that type of imagery to really convey how you felt and what you meant, using songs like that, using lyrics like that, using imagery like that. Where will that stand now? On the one hand, not on the one hand, I was saying it isn't on the one hand. You have the National Cultural Foundation over vetting lyrics.
Yep.
And now you have this backed up by a piece of legislation, then that if you share, and everybody is sharing, somebody would even go, you know, you sing the song in the tent, but somebody will go with their phone and record it. and share it with somebody. So as soon as that person shares, you know, you have an issue,
Yeah.
right? So this is the problem. This is the problem with the bill.
Not only if you share it, if it's on your computer, when the police sees the computer, because in this bill provides that the police on the warrant could go to a judge or a magistrate and say they believe you are about to commit a crime on your computer. I don't know how that is possible unless they were there bugging your phone or monitoring your internet system and know that you're going to do something. But then they can come and seize your phone. And anything on that phone that causes these problems, you could end up with the $70,000 or the 7 years in jail or both fine. So I think about your little son, 16-year-old fella that you get a phone, that you gotta keep children phones anymore. Because a lot of things, even those things that you see out there where the children put these videos up and you're all bad, and when he see it up on the internet, he's embarrassed having done it and shame. You just shame that fella. You can't post them. You can't post anything because don't think that you're going to say, well, okay, I'm not going to publish my work in Barbados. Because if you are a citizen of Barbados, you can be held liable. Let's say you went to Guyana, and because Guyana has a similar piece of legislation, it will be a crime in Guyana too, as you see with the talk show hosts that get arrested.
Mm-hmm.
If it is a crime in that jurisdiction, and there's a crime here, then you can be extradited to Barbados to face trial. And even if you don't get extradited to Barbados at the time, you can't come and watch your grandmother's funeral because they'll be there waiting for you. You know, because you don't have to commit the crime in Barbados. If you are on a boat as registered in Barbados, you committed the crime on that boat. If it is in the harbor at Timbuktu, it's a Barbados registered boat, you committed an offense. You know, and that is how serious this act was. You just happen to have to be a Barbadian, or if the information affects a computer system in Barbados, you are liable. So I don't think that you can say, well, I ain't doing no work in Barbados. I can do my work overseas. I make more money overseas anyhow, because somebody can send it back. And even if you don't send it back, but somebody sees it, and because you're on the internet, you're in trouble.
Right. Whether you post the video or not.
Whether you post it or not.
Yeah.
And anybody who then share it, they are guilty too.
So, Dave, do you want to go back to the section dealing with
Section 20?
malicious communications, section 19?
19.
Because somebody here has asked, what are the limits of lyrical interpretation and artistic expression in relation to how this bill is applied? I don't know if you want to, Caswell, if you want to make a comment on that. They asked, what are the...
Because your artistic license, your poetic license and stuff has just gotten canceled. I can tell you why. Because it says if the words or images that you use under section 19(1) causes or is likely to cause or subject a person to ridicule, contempt, or embarrassment, then dig deep down your pockets or go to jail or both. So you might be cute with your wording, but I get embarrassed by it because something might not embarrass you, but might be embarrassing to me. And now that you'll leave a magistrate to determine that this thing was so embarrassing to me. That's nonsense. If you're embarrassed, go and see a strike.
Yeah, because you see, it looks like a subjective test. as to whether it causes you annoyance, inconvenience, intimidation, humiliation. It's subjective. So it isn't, the emphasis doesn't seem to be on whether the average person would have been humiliated, but whether you personally were humiliated in the particular circumstances. So, and it does talk about who intentionally uses a computer. But what happens then is that, you can't just go and say, oh, I did intend for this to happen. What they will do is look at it in that circumstance objectively and say, well, you sent it, so what else could you have intended to do? So that's how that would be interpreted. So I'm now imagining, because when you're 17 years old, you're going to find yourself in the dock. If it's a criminal offense, you're going to be in the dock, facing years in prison, or money that you don't have, and your parent, you just come out of school, you don't have that kind of money to pay. They're gonna be looking for your parents to pay. I don't know, this could affect a lot of people, but somebody is asking whether there's a requirement to prove that you were intimidated or embarrassed. The only way that the magistrate is going to know is you're going to stand there, you're going to give evidence, and you would say, I was intimidated or embarrassed. The only thing that the magistrate will have to go on is whether they believe you or not. If you sound as though you were intimidated or embarrassed, or if there are other people around you who say, yeah, at the time he or she seemed intimidated or embarrassed.
You just gonna go in court and cry and say you felt so bad, there was some tears, boy, you're in trouble.
So Caswell, in your introductory statement, you made mention that many of the things that are covered within this bill are already on the law books. Lynette touched not too long ago on the Defamation Act and the fact that the defamation was always seen as a civil offense and therefore does not criminalize the individual. What are the other acts that were passed before that are on the law books that tie into this cybercrime bill?
The Computer Misuse Act, that is being repealed, and a lot of the provisions are being replaced. So you're not really getting rid of them. You're just taking out from the Computer Misuse Act and putting them in the Cybercrime Bill. So eventually, and putting a steeper fine on it.
Right.
Like I mentioned to you earlier, that for instance, child pornography. Child pornography, if I can pull it up quickly. Child pornography always attracted a penalty from 2015, right? Yeah, section 30 here is up on the screen. A person who knowingly publishes child pornography through a computer system or produces child pornography for the purpose of its publication through a computer system, or possesses child pornography in a computer system or a computer data storage medium for the purpose of publication is guilty of an offense, and you get $50,000 5 years, and the case of a company, $200,000. Now that has changed somewhat in this piece of legislation, but it is already there. So there was no urgent need to come and put it back again. Let me see what I mean. This was like pulling the right hand across the trail to distract you from what they really want to do. What they really want to do is to stop you from commenting on them adversely. If you remember the last but not the last one, the campaign in Franklyn was Prime Minister by the no government then opposition did use the internet to great effect. And without that party, with a lot of things that they're saying no, if you do, would be a crime that can get locked up for 7 years. But they did it and they enjoyed the fruits of their labor when they did it. Frandl didn't go to court and pray and say he feel bad, but he couldn't because there's no such provision yet. But look, so this, I think this is to shut people up. So when the creatives come and they sing their songs out, they're going to sing, I like a social commentary, I love that. I don't want a social commentary to be there singing about a daily market, and them kind of things. But I want to hear about the issues, and that's what social commentary is all about. You talk about.
So I also want to make a comment on the political aspect. Now, I have always said, well, don't let me be so dramatic. I have said in the past that probably every law that could be broken, probably with the exception of serious physical harm to people, but probably every law that you could think about is broken during elections. So what will happen during elections is that this particular piece of legislation is going to be in breach left, right, and center by politicians.
Mm-hmm.
And not a man or a woman will face the courts. Nobody will arrest them. Nobody will charge them. Nobody will go and ask any judge for any warrant to seize their cell phone or their computer or anything. They are going to do the dog, and basically they are going to get away with it. Then some of their followers, because basically they set the standard of what can be done. So then some of their followers and people in the community in general will say, oh, well, you could do these things because our leaders have done them. Our leaders and our potential leaders have done them. So you would figure, well, they're not going out there and just breaking the law. This is what young people looking at them would be saying to themselves. So when they finish for the 4-week election campaign or 5 weeks or however long it is, then they're going to stop and suddenly they're going to become saints. And then all the young people and other people who watch them are going to go there. And then they're going to be doing things in breach of this piece of legislation. And they're going to find themselves in court. Court that they've never been in their whole life. Court where they're going to go and stand up in a dock, like if they shoot somebody. And, putting this responsibility on a poor magistrate who don't usually be dealing with a $70,000 fine or 7 years in prison. That is what is going to happen. And, these things are happening more and more in Barbados. And concern isn't even the word that Barbadians accept it, that their so-called leaders who are going to get sworn in, they're going to get somebody to come and preach at the swearing in and all that kind of thing, have just broken nearly every single law on the books in Barbados in pursuit of winning a seat.
To become honorable.
I mean, to me, it's absolutely ridiculous, and we accept that. So I don't think that this piece of legislation is going to stop them from doing whatever it is that they do. Because they do it, and then they become saints, and then they go to graduation ceremonies and preach to young people about doing the right thing. I mean, how can you do that when they just saw you a few weeks ago and you weren't doing the right thing, and nobody was stopping you? Police wasn't stopping you. The church wasn't saying anything. I would imagine that church leaders, as other people see people walking about with bags of money, church leaders must know about it too. They don't say anything.
Well, interesting that you bring in the church because I believe that this legislation will affect the church as well. As we know, since COVID, a lot of churches are now using YouTube, using Zoom and other social media platforms to actually broadcast their service. And I could easily argue that something that is preached in a sermon a Sunday morning, it embarrasses me. I
You
feel
can
I feel
tell
I
me
feel
that I go in hell.
insulted. I feel humiliated. So I think the church
Go in-
themselves are in big trouble as it relates to this act as well. You were saying something, Caswell?
Yeah, I said, well, when the preacher goes and said that I go in hell, that can make me feel bad. Now, if he says that when I'm standing in his church, you can't do anything.
Right,
But as you rightly suggest, you stream it, he's in trouble. Just like if you stream your calypso, you're in
right,
trouble. And the thing is, you don't have to stream it. Somebody can stream it for you.
right. So you were saying in essence, if I am singing in the Calypso tent, somebody comes into the tent, they record my performance, they put it up on their YouTube channel. Somebody goes to their YouTube channel, watches the video of my Calypso, and they feel embarrassed or insulted or humiliated by something in my song, that I can, on conviction, I can become a criminal for singing a Calypso in a Calypso tent. I can
And
be
not
lives.
only that, but a fella can come in the tent and put somebody in there and get less time. You know,
Mhm.
it is so ridiculous because I've seen people with manslaughter get 2 years and 4 years and 5 years and things, but you get 7 years for hurting somebody's feelings.
Right.
You know?
Well, it is.
That's why I say it is just disconnected from the justice system that you currently have.
Right,
It's like from out of nowhere. Where did this come from?
right. And wait.
Yeah, where
So
did it come from
is
all of a
the
sudden?
is
It is not,
the
it is not homegrown because I saw a piece of legislation in England that was being circulated, the bill talking about 7 years and £70,000. So I think the figures they just came and they just snatch up people things because it seems to be model legislation that the people who want to keep you quiet, and this is something you would expect from Putin, not from a democratic society, or Kim Jong Un or whatever. This is what you would expect from people like that. Certainly not a democratic society that we claim to be. I know a bad. I said that's why I say claim.
so
Even the $70,000 is not in keeping with you know, with the, what's the word? Essentially the wealth of our people, the access to money that we have.
mhm.
$70,000 is a huge fine for most people, even people that will call themselves middle class or upper middle class or whatever. $70,000 is a lot of money.
So
And so then when you have a youngster that all he did was to share something, the magistrate might not put $70,000 on him, but he still has to look at the $70,000 in order to guide him
right.
as to what the person would be fined. So obviously there's a difference between if you're looking at $2,500 as a maximum penalty and if you're looking at 70,000.
Correct. So
There's another
basically,
of this bill that
Yeah.
there's another aspect of this bill where the police can come and take your phone or your computer,
yeah.
but you have a password on it. You don't give them. That's $250,000 for 5 years. And if there is an expert, maybe Paji, if you were an expert, you know something about computers, you could break into the system, you can get these things done, and you don't do it. You too. The police can call upon you to assist them to get into my phone. And
Right.
if they know that you have the skill to do so and you don't do it, you go in jail too, you know, it is that it is that horrendous. You know, I don't think that we section 20, clause 24, I think it is, of the bill. It speaks to that. If the police want to search your phone and you won't let them in, you commit an offense. And mind you, right now the law as it stands, you have a right, a constitutional right against self-incrimination. You don't have to answer any questions. You don't have to do anything. But mind you, in this piece of legislation, that makes it unconstitutional too, because you're forcing me to give evidence against myself.
Right. So is there any recourse to this, Lynette?
Well, the thing is, it's a bill, and my understanding is that they said after all the comments that they got from everywhere, including the Bar Association, which concluded that the bill should not be passed, they have said
Right.
that they're going to review it. So we have to wait to see, we have to wait on the draft, on the new draft, what that is going to say, and make our comments on that. And I just want to make the point too, that you see what we're doing here in terms of looking at legislation and commenting on it. There are places in the world that this is normal. And I
Right.
think Barbadians have to get used to the fact that this is normal. But in Barbados, when you look at a piece of legislation and you critique it, people seem to feel that it's an attack on the government. In other countries, people just do this all the time. It don't matter who in power. They just, whenever a piece of legislation comes out, they jump on it and they comment on it. And that is what we should be doing as a people. There's nothing unusual about this.
Now,
We need to start making this usual.
as a matter of fact, the standing orders of both the House and the Senate make provision for such a thing. It is just that when they come to the Parliament, they say they're begged to move that standing order 6 thing or whatever. It's suspended for the day sitting. So all they are doing is to take away those particular provisions, because when you lay a bill for the first time, they still call it the first reading, it is supposed then to go to the government printery and circulate it throughout the country, so people can see what the government proposes to do for you, or in this case, no, against you.
Right.
And that is, so then you don't debate at the same time. But when they suspend that standing order, they debate at the same time.
Okay.
But the law still require them to publish what you say. If you look at the top of this bill, you will see it marked objects and reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have to publish that in the official gazette. And they publish it after it passed. So what they're essentially saying to you is that this is what we intend to do for you. That we passed last week.
But that used to happen. It must be years ago now. But people have just become, I don't know. The traditions and the standards that we have followed in the past, which kept us in good stead. Barbados was a country admired by many other countries, in terms of the fact that we took these things seriously. But there's a reason that you don't just go to Parliament and try to pass the bill in a couple of days. You should give the public the opportunity to comment on it. In fact, in other countries, the bill is circulated well before there's any debate on it, so that you could thrash out all of the issues. And by the time it gets to Parliament, people have pretty much agreed on what should be in the bill. Or not necessarily that Parliament might agree with every interest group, but it certainly would have been debated.
Right. And we've had several interest groups that have voiced concern about this bill. We had the average man on the street that marched several times against it. There's another march coming out on Saturday as well against it. We had the Bar Association that has advised against it as is. We had, as I mentioned at the beginning, Neil Harper, cybercrime security specialist, who has spoken against it. So there's several persons who have spoken against this bill. I see there's another question in the chat, and I just want to invite the participants. At this stage, we're always going. You could feel free to drop your questions in the chat as well, and as long as it helps with the flow, we will answer those questions. Well, I wanted to ask before we move ahead, because the question I see in the chat is linked to this. Remember Caswell mentioned the Computer Misuse Act being repealed and replaced. Is that the same thing, Lynette, with the Defamation Act? Is the Defamation Act being repealed and replaced?
No, there's one provision in the Defamation Act, I recall, that is being repealed, and it is being replaced by a section in the Cybercrimes Act, in effect. I don't remember what it is right now. I don't know if Dave could put his hands on it.
It's in the comprehensive amendments, the deleting section 34. We're going to look for that.
Oh, you mean of the Defamation Act?
Yeah, the Defamation Act.
Right. Okay. So I can pull that up. So
we have a question here in the chat, Lynette, that I think that you can answer as well. It's asking, because it's related to what you said, what was the difference between a civil offense and a criminal offense?
You don't go to jail for a civil offense. You go to jail for a criminal one. That's the basic. That's the most basic difference.
That's the basic difference. And then the rules of procedure change. Some people might argue that this isn't the case, but the burden of proof really should be on the prosecution to prove.
In which scenario?
It will be on a balance of probabilities.
Okay.
So let me just see if I find the Defamation Act.
Lynette, we have gotten rid of criminal label.
I think that is the provision that it is getting rid of.
Right? We've gotten rid of criminal label.
Before?
Before, no. I know we are creating criminal label for a computer. Once you could have been jailed for criminal label.
Right, it is criminal libel that they're deleting.
Right, but no, there are no recreating it on a computer.
Right. Yes.
So you can so I don't understand it. It don't make sense to me.
Well, Caswell, let me and everybody else. You might consider this to be a reach, but I had started, before I got locked out of my Facebook, I had started looking at interesting activities for every month and writing a little article on them. So for June, I was meant to write, I've written it already, it's just that I don't have anywhere to post it now. I wrote a little article on two pieces of legislation that were passed in June. One was the Riot Act. I don't think that's the full name. It's the Riot Something Act. And the piece of legislation that was passed in the 1960s that requires, this is why we have to go to the police in order to demonstrate.
That's 1970 Public Order Act.
The Public Order Act. Right. So we have these two pieces of legislation on the books that were passed in June. The Riot Act was passed in like the 1830s, immediately after emancipation. Because obviously they didn't know, they took the position, well, we don't know what these newly freed people will do. So we better put a piece of legislation in place if they have any thoughts of getting out of hand. This is why I always marvel at this idea that Barbadians are docile when from the beginning of time, the powers that be have sought to put legislation in place to stop us from singing, dancing, marching, or talking. So in the 1830s, this piece of legislation was passed. The interesting thing, so this legislation is a piece of legislation that allowed people to shoot people in the 1930s riots. Because what the legislation says is that if you are, if you are congregating and behaving in a riotous fashion, now the total is 12 people. If 12 people get together and somebody deems that they're behaving in a riotous fashion, so if you get together in a march and somebody shout or whatever, you could say they're behaving in a riotous fashion and you read the riot act. So this riot act was read. Once the riot act is read and people don't clear the street. So I was reading Winter Crawford's account. He was in Bridgetown. And he gives an account of how a woman was just walking, coming down the street from somewhere with her fruits on her head. Now realize that this is in the 1930s. So when you read the riot act, who would have heard it? They went on the bridge and read the riot act. The people a few must see a quarter mile and know that in the riot act read. Certainly the people who lived in the country didn't know that any riot act was read. So people left the country and came into town as usual. Some of them get shot. This woman had her tray on her head with her fruits, and they shot the woman. So he said this police officer just stuck up his gun and shot the woman for no purpose. Well, the reason that he could do that is that the riot act, which is still on the books in Barbados, allows the police to shoot you if you haven't cleared the street after the riot act has been read. They're not called to account. The police or anybody who they bring together and say, okay, we're deputizing you, go there and make sure that the people stay in their homes. That is that act. So that is an act to oppress people in that time. Then you had the act of the Caswell says is 1970s.
Yeah.
That act where you cannot gather together, you have to go and get police permission.
Right.
Have to pay.
Yes.
So there's no, because somebody mentioned about the Constitution. So there's no freedom of association, freedom of speech. You gotta pay to do these things, right? I see this cybercrimes bill as following in the same footsteps as those two other bills. And if there hadn't been some protests, it probably would have been passed in June. It might still very well be in keeping with the other two.
So we've gone full circle.
Right. So this is dealing with what we can do now. Before you can beat your drums, you can dance, you can sing. So now we've been given all these tools. And when we first had the tools, when we had the internet, everybody would say, oh, there's freedom. Well, I personally always knew that there wasn't going to be this freedom that people were talking about. So what they've come to do is the freedom that you have now because of the internet. They're trying to clamp down on it. Now you see what happened with what is going on in Gaza. For my entire life, I have always heard the Israeli story. You never heard the Palestinian story. Well, not like this. Maybe in the time of Yasser Arafat, you used to hear a little bit more, but you never heard really the Palestinian story. The main media would never have shown us little children with their limbs blown off and that kind of thing. We're able to see it now because of the internet. CNN wouldn't show you that, or MSNBC or BBC, but now people have their own devices. They can share it with the world. And that has made a difference in terms of how people are reacting to what is happening in Gaza. So powerful people understand power, and they understand the power of the internet. So every time you reach a stage where there's some advance to give the majority of people power, it is taken away from them by the people who have power. And this is just one example of that. Because you see, in the 1830s, the people were going to get their freedom. So they decided, if these people do anything foolish, we are putting in this legislation, we're giving ourselves the power just to shoot and kill them. So I just wanted to make the links, because there are many people in Barbados who still feel that you shouldn't look back at your past and learn from it. But if you don't look back, you don't recognize these things. I recognize this for what it is.
And that you're onto something there, you know, because the Public Order Act came into force on the 8th of June, 1970. You know, so this June thing, it was.
It is. The other one came into effect in June as well.
Yeah, because I had it queued up to speak about area that I wanted to talk about. Me, I'm a trade unionist, and that Public Order Act was tempered by trade unionist Frank Walker, even though at the time he was in Barbados' party and he was General Secretary of the Union, and he opposed one of the conditions for the Public Order Act against marches and things. So when the act was passed, Walker decided that he's going to shut down the country after passing that form. So they had to exclude trade unions from marching and
Right.
and for permission to speak, have public meetings. I can go as a trade unionist, as long as I'm dealing with matters that deal with my rules permit me to deal with workers' rights and that kind of stuff. I can call a public meeting anywhere, as long as the person who owns the land give me permission to, because I don't go call the police and tell them anything. Mind you, when I have a march, I don't really want to march around police it myself, so I ask the police for assistance to provide security. But I didn't have to ask them for permission to go and march, and they came. Didn't have to pay a cent. But but I don't think anybody should be paying a cent. No, but I don't know where the commissioner get the idea that he has to people have to pay. Mind you, if you ask police who off duty to come because they don't have enough people on duty to do it, there is a vote. They call it flexi, just overtime. They're supposed to be paid from that. But I think this also is a way to try to stop people from marching, because
of course it is.
There is no, in the law, there is no fine for it. There's no penalty. There's no fee. But the commissioner somehow finds one. But then again, who is the commissioner? He's one of the guys who sued the government, the last administration, when he wasn't promoted. Then he lost the case at the High Court. Then he went to the Court of Appeal. He lost there too. And then he went to CCJ, and the government of Barbados said the CCJ, let them bother when we can pay them. And then they promote him commissioner. So you can see what's happening. You don't have to be any wise seer to determine what is happening here.
Right.
You
know? So someone was making the point in the comments that, you know, these things are unconstitutional. I mean, I would think that I think it's called the Riot Prevention Act. I would like to think the Riot Prevention Act is unconstitutional too. That if 12 people gather together and somebody determines that they're engaged in righteous behavior, you could just shoot them. No,
but what happened now, in order for something to be determined to be unconstitutional, a court has to say so. So you're gonna let it happen and get in court. You know? Because
that would be an interesting one to take to court, because you know that piece of legislation that was passed, was it that people were going to be incarcerated without the opportunity to apply for bail?
Yes.
Right.
For murder. you got at least 2 years before you can get bail.
Right. Right. You could be locked up for 2 years without getting any bail. And the High Court found that that was unconstitutional, and it has gone to the Court of Appeal. Because in the Constitution, even though there's an exception for peace, order, and good governance, so it's saying you can make laws for peace, order, and good governance. But if they are, as one would say, beyond the pale, they would still be unconstitutional. So this one was considered to be such that you're going to have to, I mean, and in Barbados, it isn't hard to go before a judge to get bail. You know, it's like when you had during COVID. Well, during COVID must have been the most oppressive time in Barbados because you couldn't say anything. My view always was that there was no need for us to have any amendment to the Emergency Management Act
Absolutely none.
in order to allow the cabinet, without reference to anybody or anything, to just do what it feel like. This is not Congress in the United States where you gotta travel from somewhere or the other, Mississippi or something, to get to Washington. You can easily get to Bridgetown. You could do it by Zoom. You could do it by telephone. You could do it by round robin email. There was absolutely no need for those powers to be given. But when you said that, Barbadians felt that you were attacking the government. And I would like to say here that as citizens, we have to learn to understand that the government is bigger than us individuals. So whenever we get the chance, don't you see people always be thinking party. I ain't talking about the party. I talking about government. Government has so much power in its hands that you must always be skeptical about what your government is doing.
So much or too much? Too much power. So much power or too much power?
Well, in Barbados, we have a lot of work to do in terms of putting checks and balances on our government. Whatever we had in place before, they have outlived their usefulness. They don't help us anymore.
Lynette, you were absolutely right. As far as I'm concerned, when you're talking about there was no need to amend the legislation, but this was done in order to put all the power in one person's hand. Because I remember hearing the Attorney General saying that we don't have any laws dealing with how to deal with something with a public health emergency. That was an absolute lie, because the Constitution of Barbados, Section 25, provides that. Let me just read it for people. Let's read subsection 2 that subsection 1 provides for the state declaring the state of emergency, and then subsection 2 says a proclamation made by the Governor General shall not be effective for the purpose of subsection 1 unless it is declared therein that the Governor General is satisfied A, that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the imminence of a state of war between Barbados and another state, or as a result of the occurrence of any earthquake, hurricane, flood, fire, outbreak of pestilence, outbreak of infectious disease or other calamity, whether similar to the foregoing or not. That covers everything. So there was nothing that you couldn't track as for public emergency here. But under this section of the law, you had to take it to Parliament and get it passed. None of the COVID directives have been put before the House, have not been laid before the House so far, up to today.
All right.
Under the law, as it stood before then, you had to bring them before Parliament within 7 days of making them. So that was to get away from publishing the law for the public to see.
Right. Okay. So what I want to do now is to help pull us back on course as it relates to the creatives and the
That is not off course.
Yeah,
of course, we were putting it in context.
Understood.
It is important not to look at these things separately.
Isolated. Yeah, understood. I want to now open up for questions from the participants that are here. I just want to ask you to raise your hand, and then once we identify you, you can go ahead and ask your question. So I have some questions for the audience, and that is based on what was shared so far. Were you aware that these details were in the cybercrime bill? For the artists and the creatives that are on the call, were you aware of the implications that were highlighted here? For the calypsonians that are on the call, were you aware? As was said before, something as simple as you singing in the calypso tent and somebody recording your performance, putting your performance on YouTube or any other social media platform, and a person, as we see here, Section 20 of the Cybercrime Act, cyberbullying, a person feels that they are embarrassed or insulted or humiliated by your song, then you can be fined up to $70,000 or face 7 years in prison. Were you aware of that? I saw, let me just get back to the chat. I saw two questions there. One question is asking if you think that our government is dictated to by the colonials. I would like to add on to that question as well, and ask, like, what's the world context? Because Caswell, you made reference to the similarities between this bill and the legislation that you saw as it relates to the UK.
The UK, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Guyana, the legislation is around about the same thing. And, for instance, in Nigeria, a lady got arrested because this company made we call it tomato paste or some sort of tomato sauce.
Right.
And she commented that it was not as good as some other, it wasn't good. And the company felt hurt, and they had her arrested for making a comment on the mind you, she used her computer. And as a result, she was arrested and brought before the court for criticizing, or for saying that, give a product review. That's what she did.
Mm-hmm.
Because you recall that it mentions in terms of, I think it's intimidation. I don't know if it's the malicious one, but it does make reference to specifically to harming businesses.
In cyberbullying, is it in this section as well? Intimidation, hatred, anxiety.
Emotional distress, anxiety, intimidation.
No, but I'm talking about the business part.
Okay.
First, specifically to business. I think it's I think maybe it's the malicious statements one.
Section 23.
That or 19.
19 is malicious communication.
19, yeah.
Right. The injury includes injury or damage to the person, respect of his business, occupation, profession, employment, or other source of income. So you can cause injury to a business by what you see while doing a product review.
But that happens all the time.
Well, before you were free to do those things.
Not no, but you're still free to do it, but not probably the internet.
I don't know. It depends on how you view the world and things that are happening. I don't think that there are any colonials. Well,
neo-colonials.
Right. There might be some more modern word which is appropriate, but basically people who have power seek to ensure that people who do not never get it.
Right. So in essence, it is an oppressive bill, an oppressive legislation, just like you highlighted when you lay the foundation there of the Right Prevention Act and the that was linked to the Public Order Act as well.
Public Order Act.
Mhm.
But remember that this was being done from the time Barbados was settled by people other than the indigenous people that
Right.
were here before.
Mhm.
Who we always forget them, and we should really not do that. In our Barbadian history, we tend to exclude them. We behave as though Africans were here before them, but they were here before us. So we really need to do something to recognize them. But that is going off on a tangent on that one. But this was going on from the very beginning. From the very beginning, you try to stop people from expressing themselves
Right.
throughout. There are pieces of legislation throughout from the earliest times. So the whole thing just continues. And you know, like if you read Walter Rodney, this is what Walter Rodney was talking about. That's why he had to be killed.
Mhm.
He was talking about the efforts always to oppress people, to stop them from speaking, to stop them from expressing themselves, how the powerful people behave, how they treat people, how we must always see them as mommy or daddy or auntie or uncle or papa or some foolishness like that. In the Caribbean, that's been going on from the beginning of time. And the majority of people continue with the nonsense. Instead of growing up and looking after ourselves, we don't need any one person to look after us.
Agree. Very, very true. Um, so we touched on how this bill affects I would say primarily the Calypsonian. But Lynette, I know in another capacity, were you the president of the Film Association at one point in time?
Well, yeah, for 3 years.
Right. How would you say that this bill would affect the creatives in that sector?
Well,
Film,
it probably affects them even more directly because the medium is film.
Right.
And you're going to be using some kind of technology or device to some kind of computer device in order to distribute it, to publish it,
Right.
as opposed to a Calypsonian who could sing a song in a tent and may not be using a device. A filmmaker will always be using a device of some kind. And certainly the internet is very, very important to them in terms of collaborations. They might be trying out something. They certainly will send it across the internet.
Mhm.
As long as the files are not too big, you know, they will do that, and in order to collaborate and develop aspects of the film. So this touches and concerns them directly, and film, well, I really wonder because basically the really the only real restrictions in film is that they're given a category, you know, PG, etc.
Mhm.
But basically filmmakers are free to make The Exorcist and all those kind of different films.
Right.
So the truth is they should really pay attention to this and how it affects them as filmmakers
So
related to
it's
them.
definitely a case of um a lack of freedom of expression in their case, because what would pertain to other creatives in other territories, no, they don't have that liberty anymore.
No. And you know, the thing about Barbados though is that I don't know, I'm beginning to feel that you have laws, but it seems to be at the discretion of individuals whether you enforce them or not.
Hmm.
It's true. That is absolutely true. Like for instance, I'll give an example. This might be reaching a little bit, but
Mhm.
right now you see T-shirts say vote mayor, vote Barbados, the party mayor cares. That is a criminal offense in Barbados. Put
Yes,
on
it
the,
is.
put on the books by Tom Adams,
Mhm.
you know, and you see thousands of those shirts all over the place. People still wear them all it now. And it is still an offense to wear them all it now. Because they said before, during, or after the election.
Yeah.
And but what? So what? Do I care? The laws are selectively enforced in Barbados. Now, if you are favorable to the government, your song might get through. If you are not, you might be finding yourself, especially if you criticize the government or anything like they did, you can find yourself before the court. And the thing is, it isn't that you might be opposed to them, because I remember Colin Spencer singing songs against the Democratic Labour Party when the Democratic Labour Party was in power. About Colin Spencer. He was true to the art form. He saw something. He thought he did social commentary on it. He didn't care who was in power. So no, so he would have gotten lashes from both sides. But in this case, if your party is in power and you are saying things that they're like, you might get through. The other fellow, no, he might not care about who in power or not. He's just singing a good calypso.
But you see, that's why I made the point about this particular bill. And when it is passed, during the election campaign, every section of it somebody will be in breach of every section of it, and nothing will happen. And then a little fellow will send a picture to one of his friends, and he will be in the dock. That's what happens in Barbados, and I don't understand why people aren't outraged by it. So you see the t-shirt thing that you talk about. Suppose you have a fellow who don't belong to one major parties, and by some stroke of luck, he manages to win a seat, but turns up the night with a t-shirt on. You know that it would take re-election from him. They will take him to court and say that he is in breach. And he would say, but everybody else had t-shirts. But people from BLP had t-shirts too. And they would say, well, the judge would say, well, they're not before us. You are. And he would get in trouble.
So the reverse doesn't have any place in court. So for example, if a precedent has been set in the past, in a previous case, lawyers usually make reference to that case. In this scenario, in the scenario that you painted, where persons will break the law during election time, obviously a person in power, and then nothing happens to them, but then the average man does it. There's absolutely no grounds for your lawyer highlighting.
It takes a long time to develop customary law.
Customary law, okay.
to try to argue that.
Right.
But I mean, this is often baffled me as to how young men would be sitting on the block smoking with their political representatives, and nothing happens. Everything is cool. You're drinking a drink, you're smoking, you're looking at firearms, you're doing all kinds of things, and nothing don't happen. And 2 nights from now, they're doing the same thing.
Yeah, when the political representative there, they just run through the bush and go along, and that's happened in Barbados.
I am completely baffled as to how they feel that is all right. That once the person there, nothing gonna happen. But the 2 nights from now, a whole set of black vehicles going turn up with rifles and all kinds of things, and them scampering, hiding under the mother bed and all kinds of things like that. Being treated not like men, but like boys, not even boys, little boys. And that's all right with them. I could not be humiliated in that way and it'd be all right with me.
So the same Colin Spencer that Caswell mentioned just now had a song called Gag Order at one point in time. Is this a elevated case of a gag order being issued against not only the Calypsonians now, but the creatives in the land.
But you always had banning and Calypso, things that really and truly were just good fun. And you see CBC, Starcom Network and stuff. When you listen to these songs a bit, what the band is for? Just that somebody don't like it. No, it ain't only a band that you can get.
Exactly.
Unless you get the red band for red band prisoner. If you be a good fella and you think after a few years, you know, you behave yourself good, you get a kind of promotion to the prison. That's the only band you will get. Good luck here. For good, clean fun.
Well, Dave here raises the question about what does this mean for artists who are supposed to tell the stories of the society in the way that they want to tell it. And now, you know, you will have individuals saying that they are embarrassed or humiliated, or make the artists even more afraid than they are currently to express themselves. Now, all that is true. But I think one of the things that sometimes we don't think of is that this fight is a continuous fight. It doesn't end.
So you're saying even if the bill is passed, because it hasn't been passed as yet, there is still a continuous fight.
Even if it is passed with the amendments that you want.
Mhm.
Yeah, even if it is passed in the House,
Right.
and not in the Senate. So what happens, and this is what I'm fearful of, when you go into committee, the committee does not redraft the act and put it, they just say, well, clause 2, you will change and to or. So unless you have the act in your hand, you don't know what they're talking about. And that is the report that comes before the House. And so if you're waiting for a report to come before the House, a well-drafted bill, that would be unprecedented. It does not work like that. I've seen 1 or 2 committee reports on committees. All you get is you gotta be an attorney or somebody with the actual piece of legislation in their hand, and then you gotta start going in and scrolling out this and writing in that. This is meant to deceive, because first of all, it was passed in the House. The House can't go back on it, but they have. The House cannot reflect on legislation that is already passed unless you had a proroguing of Parliament. But they're going back on it. So they break every rule because they were being put under pressure. But they won't pass this. Look, I suspect they can still pass it with minor amendment, and people can then find out how really draconian it is. What the creators must do is to get up and let their voices be heard, not only in Calypso, but on the street. Because they say when we are marching, they say, oh, there's a few people out there. But these few people got the bill pulled back for a little bit.
Correct.
So we need a few more. We need a few more people to come out there. And this is in your own interest, because first of all, I have probably sent 10 text messages in my entire life. You know what I mean? I hardly use the internet for disseminating persons. So it's affecting me.
Mhm.
It's affecting you. It's affecting your livelihood, because I make money with my brain and my mouth and my feet. You know, I go and address a crowd of workers. I don't have to be on the internet. I don't send text messages to do that. You know, that is my thing. I read legislation. I go before a tribunal and I argue what the word legislation means. It is not affecting me per se. It's not even going to affect my children, because all of them are the island. You know what I mean? So I'm fighting for you and your children. And you are not, you are in there saying, no, woman, that I will continue to fight for you. And you don't come fight for yourself. You have to stand up. There's strength in numbers. One thing, I heard Lynette say this, and I agree with her. Politicians see numbers.
Yeah.
So if the numbers are out there for them to see that there are lots of people that are opposed to what they're saying, they will back down because every person you go there, you got 3 or 4 people that they're going to influence. Sometimes even more. So let's say you got 1,000 people out there, politicians looking at 3,000, 4,000 votes that would go against them. So that is when they will take notice. But if you got 5 or 6 people, that's nobody care.
Sean,
Hey, Dave.
hey, I want to ask a question. The Calypso season is on us.
Yes.
I know tents have opened already.
Yeah.
And by the end of July, it would have wound down. But the bill has not been passed, it's still being discussed. Does it mean that this year's Calypso season is safe? Does it mean that the guys are free to express themselves as they choose, to criticize who they want to criticize? And even among each other, even in the party, you can have a song that is bashing somebody else. Does it mean that they are free to do that? The artists are free to do that because the bill is still being debated, and therefore it will kick in probably from next year? Does it work that way?
Good question. Who want to take that one? You're muted, Caswell.
Yeah, the simple answer is yes. It is not the law yet, so they can't enforce it. That's what you got to stand and make sure it don't become the law.
But I don't think the Calypsonians have been safe for a long time. This is just an additional
burden.
Yeah, it's an additional way to keep them singing certain songs and not to really engage in the social commentary.
Well, you still had Gabby, and you still had Serenada, and
Grainer.
and Griner, and you had Kid Sight. You still had some guys who would, as you say, give a good punch. During last year you had Cat Piss and Pepper. What's her name now? What's her name again now? Terry. That was pretty biting. But what if Cat Piss and Pepper's on the internet? What if someone plays that in 2025? Would she be in trouble? In other words, the season is not passed as yet, but then you're gonna record stuff. Everything is on the internet now. Everything goes to YouTube. Does it mean that the song that you sing in 2024 could become a problem for you as soon as the bill is passed? Somebody can bring up a song that they saw in the tent and say, but this song embarrassed me in July 2024. It's now September 2025, and can they do that? Does
they can't do that. What they can do is disseminate it. No. And no, you catch it. They can't say, well, I saw it last year, but if I post it after the act is passed, I will post it then. And you're in trouble.
You're in trouble. So you're not really free. You're not really out of the woods.
So technically the only way to escape this bill is if you remove your content from online, because you could anybody could reshare the YouTube.
No, but you can remove it because somebody's gonna put it back up.
Well, that's true too.
Because it's been shared before.
Yeah.
People download it, all kinds of things.
And can someone maliciously record you saying something and put it up? Even though like a private conversation, can someone maliciously record something that you said and share it, and that could cause you a problem?
Yeah, well, for instance, let's go law before there is this bill. If I go there and I say something about Lynette and it is untrue and it defames her in a certain way, if somebody records that, that is proof when it's played that I said it about her, at least to one other person. So what will happen? It will same thing will apply now. Once you communicate it again, at least to one other person. And the internet is not the one person. It is anybody who's willing to look at it.
Right.
you're in trouble. Harvey, look, the only way to get past this bill is to make sure it don't pass.
It don't pass.
At least not to pass in this form that it's in.
Right. Wow.
Because if I cause embarrassment, I think because but like for instance, I went on the radio and they said the attorney general was talking about, and they said this and legislation that he was saying, and then I read it. Remember the police, when he created the second force, of deputy commissioner of police, and he argued with me, went on there and said, you know what you're talking about, and then when I went to check it all, it was right, and it was all over the internet, but laughing at him and thing. He could have been embarrassed. They could have been in jail. They become nobody know though. You know what I mean? But that's what's gonna happen.
So basically what you said just now, if this bill is passed and next year somebody goes back to that video, because you said it's all over the internet, and they reshare it, then you could find yourself in trouble. A year from now.
A year from now, 10
Oh.
years from anything from now.
Yeah, so Caswell, are you also making the point? You were making the point that you can say something that is true, which would be a defense if it were defamation.
Yeah.
But in
Oh,
this
in this bill.
situation, you can say something that is true, but it intimidates, humiliates,
Or
Embarrassed
whatever the
person.
person, and there's no defense of truth.
But I can't do it. But I'm embarrassed. But I'm embarrassed. Whether you like it or not, I'm embarrassed. You don't have to tell a lie to embarrass me. You could say something about me that I don't want anybody to know.
Right.
And then you get embarrassed. You know, because the test is if the victim is embarrassed. I'm embarrassed.
You see, because Calypsonians have always been concerned about the Defamation Act.
Yes.
But no, this is worse than Defamation Act.
Exactly.
So they shouldn't wait till after it's passed to be concerned.
So could this be the death of culture, the death of our culture?
Exactly. It has serious implications for our culture, because I was just going to take it in the direction of NIFCA. We recently had a piece from Praise Academy in NIFCA that the NCF thought was offensive, or that could cause humiliation or embarrassment to some persons, and that piece was banned. I mean, it's no legal issue, but as was said before, even as it relates to Calypso, before your song was being banned from the radio station, but you were not being criminalized. Under this bill, no, even for those children who participated in the Praise Academy piece, it means that those children then can be criminalized as well, which is absolutely crazy.
It doesn't even have to cause embarrassment. It's the words of the legislation that says whether they are true or false and causes or is likely to cause embarrassment.
Crazy.
You know, so you don't have to embarrass the person, but if it is such that it can cause embarrassment.
Right.
Someone has his or her hand up.
Yeah.
Samsung.
Yeah. City Han, go ahead.
Hi, good night. I came on late.
Okay.
I this is really a bit mind-boggling to me, because
Agreed.
I am listening to the speakers and I'm really trying to wrap my head around this whole thing with the cybercrime bill and stuff like that. Really trying to understand it, because a few days ago, a friend of mine had mentioned it to me, but honestly, I didn't really pay much attention to it. But a friend of mine had told me that when I say told, she had mentioned to me on WhatsApp that this panel was on tonight. It started at 7, but I actually came on just about after 8. So I remembered late. But to get to the point, I remember hearing a few years back, somebody may recall this, Oprah Winfrey was sued by, I think, some persons in America who owned like a beef company or who had cattle or something like that. And she had made this statement saying that something about the beef or something about eating red meat or something like that causes like certain health risks and stuff like that. And actually what she said was true. So when she was sued and she went to court, she proved what she was saying is true, and the case against her was dropped. So if I understand Mr. Franklyn, Caswell Franklyn very clearly, you're saying to me that even if you say something about a person and what you are saying is the honest to God truth, because it causes that person to be embarrassed, you, based upon what you said, and you shared on the phone or the computer, whatever, you can be criminalized and you can be fined and put in jail because what you say about a person and it is true just because it causes them embarrassment?
I'm not saying that.
Am I hearing it correctly? Sorry, go ahead. I listen. Sorry, please correct me.
That section 19 of the clause 19 of the bill is saying that. It says a person who intentionally uses a computer system to disseminate any image or words, not care whether they're true or false, and causes or is likely to cause or subject a person to ridicule, contempt, or embarrassment. So I'm not saying that that's what the legislation is saying. I'm just nothing that I've said here comes from me. I'm just reading the legislation. I am not interpreting it. I'm just telling you what it says.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I just really wanted to understand that, because to me it sounds rather weird, because I would have thought that this is something that happens every day. People say things about other people, whether true or false, and people get embarrassed, but they have to learn to get over it. So I just really listening to understand, but thank you very much.
It happens every day, but somehow it seems that because it is within the context of the internet, people have lost their mind, to be honest, because you do this every day. So I don't know what is peculiar. The internet is just another tool, another way to communicate.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of things that happen on the internet. Years ago, I think it was 1989 to be exact, there was a seminar dealing with pensions. I was a participant. And they were saying that by 2035, if there were no amendments to the pension legislation, that it would, the funding, the national insurance fund would go bust. And they were talking about amending the legislation to change the rules to make sure you get less pension, all kind of stuff. And I said 2035, the 98, that's a bunch of years from now. The best thing to do is to go and breathe. You know, I saw that on the internet last year. It was still there. You know, I said that was true. I said you need to breathe. Instead of getting less people, you need to get more people. And I actually volunteered. And what happened? No, it's always going to be there on the internet.
Right.
That was 1989.
Yeah, I think is absolutely crazy. Like I said, we have I share the concern of the participant there just now. It is just absolutely crazy. It is draconian. It is oppressive, as was said before. I love the history that Lynette gave to show you that we've just gone full circle. And the same thing is just happening again. I would say the worst thing about it is that it is not the question that was asked in the chat is not being enforced on us by colonizers, but it's being done to us by our own. Absolutely crazy. You have another question in the chat. It says, so if an employer, someone enters my premises and is embarrassed by an employee playing a video on a company computer, does the police then have grounds to seize the computer equipment?
That's if it is connected to the internet, yes. And once it's connected to the internet, This is about cyberspace, cybercrime. If you are playing and you're not connected to the internet anywhere, they can't do anything. But as long as you connect to the internet, bam.
You're muted, Lynette.
You're muted.
I think the thing is, what happens in this case is this person is on the internet, but the person who comes into the
Establishment.
place of business is not
Yeah.
on the internet.
Yeah.
So it means the person hasn't communicated anything via the internet. If you see what I'm saying.
So
They just come and they see it. They come and they people of the person's shoulder and they see them playing a video. So the person hasn't transmitted it to them.
right. So you're saying that it could be a case where the video, the person who is in the business could be a video that they took live, but they have not necessarily uploaded it or posted it to any social media platform.
And they haven't shared it with this person who has walked in the business.
Okay, so even if it is online, once they haven't shared it with this individual, then
No, if you're online and they see it, brother, how can we say as long as it's online? Because you are not committing a crime in cyberspace. And I know about it. As long as I know about it.
But you in cyberspace too?
No.
Huh? No, I just got scared. Let's say somebody come and bring it to me and show me. They're never done. Somebody has it, they download on their phone, and they come and show me. They say, look, you see that? Why embarrassed? The body even they just have to like download and show me. And I'm in trouble. As a matter of fact, the person who got their phone is in trouble too. Because
Lisa,
once the police sees your phone.
Lisa, you just had the section up. I think it was Lisa who had it up, or Dave.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask a question on that as well, because even as it relates to the artists or the creatives, if someone records something that you do and they upload it to a social media platform, it says a person who intentionally uses a computer system. So you are not a person who uploads it, which means you are not a person who intentionally use anything, computer system, phone, iPad.
But if you hadn't done it, right, I can get it. So you would have aided me.
Right, that's the other section.
Commission of that crime.
Right.
That's 22.
Right, got you.
Right, so you have to aid me in committing an offense. I am subject to the same penalties as you.
Right.
I think if you just have it on your phone and somebody comes and looks at it, and they are offended by it, I don't think that falls within the legislation.
No, but if the person got it transmitted to them on the internet, the person who shows it to me, if they saw it on the internet or it was sent to them, that is a cybercrime in itself.
Right.
Let's say I'm the subject, it's about me, and you show me, I get the police and say these people got this thing about me, and I'm embarrassed. You don't have to send it to me on the internet. It's like I just got to know about it. That caused me embarrassment. So the poor fella who made the post, and I made this. Let's say it isn't a post at that point. Yeah, he just made a video, and somebody posted his video. The person who posted could not have done it unless he had assistance from somebody else. You who made it, you would have abetted it. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is,
that's why the guy in Guyana got locked up, because he didn't make the statement on the thing, but he provided the platform.
Yeah, the content.
Right. So what I'm saying is, this is a situation where I am sitting in my office. You come there to do something or the other. You said, oh, there's a phone. Let me look and see what the time is. You look at the phone, and instead of saying the time, a YouTube video is on, which is showing something that you find embarrassing, humiliating, or whatever.
It's on the internet. YouTube is on the internet.
Right, but it talks about sending it. It's on my computer. I didn't send it anywhere.
Yeah, you didn't
For
broadcast
the
it on
purpose of
platform.
causing annoyance.
Mhm.
It's just sitting there. It might have been even that YouTube was just playing automatically and it got there. I didn't do anything.
Right.
I think there could possibly be an out in a case like that.
You could try, but the app, no, the app says that it's on your. I'm trying to find the section. When the police sees your phone and find anything on it, whether you distribute it or not, because it would have to have been sent across the cyberspace to get your phone in the first place. So once it has gone across the internet and you got it on your phone, you in the bet you do something. Don't send it, don't post it, delete it. That's all you're gonna do. As a matter of fact, for years I get a lot of stuff. Says the computer misuse app. People send me things. I call them. I say, listen, do not send that kind of stuff to me.
Mhm.
And when they do, I say, but next time I get the police. So I get killed a lot of chats for saying so. You know my chats again? No. Even some school chats. I'm on any chats, no. Because I take it very seriously because I feel people will look at me, you know. So I'm not giving them the opportunity.
So once you receive something that was sent via the internet
Delete it.
and you don't delete it, then you would have been aiding in this crime, according to this bill.
Once the police sees it, but let's say the police get your phone.
Mm.
And the thing is, you can't tell them you're not giving them your phone.
Right.
Because you have to give them. And then when you don't give them the password, that's a crime. And when you, as a matter of fact, you find this $250,000 for not giving the police your
device,
your password. And then
$1,000.
Yeah, and then if Lynette knows how to get in the computers and they don't do it, so for instance, even let me show you some years ago in the States, they wanted to get into people's phone and event to the providers. The providers refused to give them. Under this legislation, the providers in Barbados can't refuse. Yes, they can't refuse, but they refuse, they can face the court.
250,000 as well.
You know, so it is serious of digital flow or wolf, or whatever they call themselves these days. You think they can go and get locked up for you? They can get the information. So they can get into your phone. And so and let's say I'm an expert and they know that I know how to get into the phone. It says a person who fails without lawful excuse or justification to assist a police officer in accordance with subsection 1 is guilty of an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $25,000. This is for the person who fails to do it. Then it said, you know, and if you try to prevent the fellow from getting the phone, similar fine. You know, you can't. There is no escaping this piece of legislation. They're not getting away from it. The only way to get away from this is to make sure it don't pass.
Right.
Question, Sean.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Isn't there a section in the bill that speaks to this happening overseas and they're being able to have you extradited? If
yes.
you commit the offense overseas, they can have you brought home?
Yes.
Yeah.
If it is an offense in that particular jurisdiction, it says section 3, very early in the act, section 3. See if we can pull it up quickly for me.
Okay.
Section 3 of the act. Application. Section 3, it says application. Yeah. says that the act applies to any act done on or yes, good, thanks. It says this act applies to any act done or an omission made A, in Barbados, B, on a ship or aircraft registered in Barbados, or C, by a national of Barbados outside the territory of Barbados, if the person's conduct would also constitute an offense under the law of the country where the offense was committed. And of course, you see what happened in Guyana because they got similar provisions. So it would be a crime in Guyana. So you'd be in trouble if you were in Guyana. And it says for the purpose of paragraph A and of subsection 1, an act is carried out in Barbados if A, the person is in Barbados when the act is committed, or the person is outside of Barbados at the time when the act is committed, but 1, the computer system located in Barbados or electronic data storage medium located in Barbados is affected by or contains the information about the act, or 2, the transmission or effect of the act or the damage resulting from the act occurs in whole or in part within Barbados. And then it tells you about the mutual assistance in criminal matters, whatever else. And also, so you can find yourself innocently, one of the people in the diaspora, I think they like call that word, in the diaspora, interested in Barbados and posting things, and when they catch you, log up. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people don't realize that there, but it's very early in the act. They didn't even hate it.
Yeah. So I think from the history of these things, because the Riot Prevention Act is there, and it hasn't been used since the 1930s, I would imagine. But you see, the thing is, it's there. So I'm thinking probably what's going to happen with this piece of legislation is that it's just going to be sitting there. People will write some calypsos that might be in breach. You're not going to hear anything, but it is going to be used when the powers that be think it is necessary to use it. That's what happens.
So pretty much to victimize an individual.
It's just like all the other laws that we have.
Like if you want to run against them, then they will come up for you. You decide you're gonna be a candidate. Who? You're a candidate, and then put something in that like that embarrass me. You're gone.
So then the majority of people then they have this false sense that everything's fine.
Correct.
Because nothing is happening. But it will be used selectively when people want to use it.
But worse yet, you might figure that these people are your people who are in power now, so they're gonna trouble you. Unless they're planning to be in power forever, somebody else might come into power and then it affects you.
Or it might just be different. It might be the same party, it might be different people.
You know?
I'm friends with you.
All right, there you go.
So we are a little past 9, so we're 4 minutes over. Lynette, you want to expand a little bit on this question that is asked in the chat? I see you responded to it in the chat. Dealing with creative license, and if the creative license of the Calypsonians will no longer exist. And it's touching on something that Caswell said before as well, which ties into the Defamation Act. Defamation, if the truth was being told, then it wasn't a major issue. But as was said, with this act doesn't deal with if what you're saying is true or not. But once the person that you're saying it about deems it to be embarrassing or humiliating, then you can find yourself before the law courts.
So I would say the person asked if it is the end. I would say no, it is not the end. But I think what people have to understand, as I said before, this is a continuous struggle. There are some people in Barbados who believe, for example, that the powers that be in Trinidad and Tobago allow Trinidadian Calypsonians to sing whatever they feel like. They have had the most strident legislation against Calypsonians, more so than Barbados, that the Calypsonians turn around and sing about it. The fact that you want to lace them a foot, you want to lace them a mouth, things like that. There's a calypso about that. I think it's by Lord Kitchener, or when he was younger, or one of the older Calypsonians. So they have always had to be rebelling against the legislation that was put in place. They have had lots of pieces of specific legislation against Calypsonian singing. In Barbados, I believe a more subtle approach has been used. What has been used over time is this economic tool. So, you know, people have written about this. The fact that culture in Barbados is consolidated into one place in the NCF.
Right.
Before it was spread across the country, you had a lot of different groups that were engaged in cultural activities. It was the church, the AYPA, the cricket club, the netball club, these cultural and social groups that you had in St. John, you had in Six Rose, you had in Gall Hill, all over the place. And you had culture all over Barbados. The truth is, it was just as it still is in England. You can go to England, you go in a little village, and they have their theater and everything still going from back in the day. And Barbados had that. But then Barbados decided that it would consolidate everything into the NCF. And because then it is government, there's money to encourage you. I'm not saying NCF is all negative, but what it means is that it pulls all the culture together, and therefore it dictates how culture, how artists express themselves. It helps to dictate that. So I'm saying that even though you've had all of this legislation, and you've had this legislation from the first time our ancestors ever came here, there was legislation like this piece of legislation to stop you from expressing yourself. So what you have to do, you have to understand that the powers that be will put legislation like this in place. But the powers that be actually know that they are not as powerful as you together. They know that.
Correct.
So
they never
go as far as they could. Otherwise, they would have shot more people since 1930 something under the Riot Prevention Act. They would have utilized the what is that? The 1970s Act. They would have utilized that more.
Public Order Act.
The Public Order Act, but they haven't. So this is going to be put in place to be used strategically. Now, if they want to shut down those marches that are occurring now, they will just say, we are under too much pressure. We cannot facilitate it. We don't have the manpower, and that'll be the end of that. They can do that. They can do that at any point. Any point at which they feel that they don't want that to happen anymore. So Calypsonians can, if you are a true artist, I believe, if you are a true artist, you will continue to express yourself because that is you. You can't help but do it. So I said correct, but that isn't true. It's not the end. It's not the end. Remember that people in days gone by would get their hand chopped off for beating a drum. That can happen to you. So, you know, we actually have more power now, but we need to use it. And I see all of these things as connected. So when I see that we have more power now, we have ability, we have access to information. in a way that we haven't had before. But we haven't figured out how to use it. That's the problem. So I don't think it's the end.
So you think
If you're a true artist, you can't help but express yourself. Caswell can't help but talking. They ain't gonna stop him.
So I told them the last time that ever locked me up, I go up and Dodge and organize a strike on the food. So the best that me out here. So that's what I do. You know what I mean?
All right, give me your final thoughts because we have to wrap up. We are 11 minutes over our scheduled time. Go ahead, Caswell. Maybe a close.
Let me just say I'm very grateful for the opportunity to come and discuss this piece of legislation because I think it's one of the most draconian pieces of legislation that I have seen in my lifetime. And I've seen the Public Order Act and I've seen others. But this one pales all the others into insignificance because this now seeks to take away your rights in a wholesale thing. They don't want left with anything. They don't even want you to have an opinion. And I am saying to the people of Barbados, don't wait until it is passed and then start to fight back. Start fighting now. Because I don't wait for some person to get a judge to say it is unconstitutional, but by the time the judges get to say that, you would have been in jail for 7 years. If you see what I'm talking about. So you need to stand up. You need to stand up now and stand up and be counted. Lynette was right. She still is right. Politicians see numbers. And when they see the numbers against them, they back down. So force them to back down. It is your livelihood because I can't sing a note. But I like music, but you know, that was not part of my thing. I used to be in a choir years ago when I was at school. And then one morning I my voice said, and then I choir I had Johnny Cadets. But this is your livelihood. And if you care so much about politics and politicians, and not your own livelihood, not for you, what your children will eat and wear and your mortgage, if you care more about politicians than that, then ignore us. But if you're not going to take, if you're interested in taking care number one, and that gets number one, that's my wife, and then number two. But if you're interested in taking care number one and number two, you have to stand up against this. You don't got no choice.
Agree. Thank you, Caswell. Lynette, parting shots. You're muted. Still muted.
Just to say that what we're doing here is normal. In Barbados, though, it seems that to critique legislation is seen as close to subversive. I just want you to know that it isn't. In other countries where I wouldn't say live, but have spent a short period of time where I have been able to see how people operate. When you have a piece of legislation, everybody comments on it. They get comments from the university, they get comments from the man in the street, they get from academics, they get from activists, they get from communists, anybody at all. Everybody comments on the legislation. People that demonstrate, people write letters, all kinds of things. That is what democracy is about. There's nothing subversive about this. This is natural and normal. And if we really want to participate in a true democracy, we have to do this. And you don't, like Caswell is happy to read the legislation and explain it all to you from beginning to end. So you don't actually have to sit and read it yourself. We put up some sections that you can have a look at, etc. So we know that not everybody wants to take up a piece of legislation and read the whole thing, but you have to be engaged, and this is normal. And I will be doing this, Kaz will be doing this, no matter who or which government we have. It doesn't matter. It just goes on. That's how it should be.
Agreed again. Thank you, Lynette. Just gonna ask Dave to give a vote of thanks. Really appreciative of you guys making the time to, I would say, diving specifically as it relates to the creative industries and the creatives and the artists in this country, helping them to understand the seriousness of this bill and therefore the action that is required. Now, as somebody said in the chat, we need to be proactive and not reactive. When I would say the window to be proactive is shrinking fast. Yes, the fight will continue, but we need to act. We need to act now. Unity is strength and there's strength in numbers. Over to you, Dave.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Thanks to the panelists who did an awesome job. I think that they made it absolutely clear. So clear that the lady who asked the question, she couldn't believe her ears, that she couldn't believe that what she was hearing was actually true. Thank you, Caswell. Thank you, Lynette, for agreeing, and without any twisting of the arms, you guys just agreed that you will come here and share your knowledge with the people, with the artists, because we care about our artists, we care about our culture, and the artists are the ones who bring us the information of what's going on. And it's not gossip or maliciousness, but it does bring us the facts of what's happening. And that is so important. We think of Gabby and the stuff he did. We think of Colin Spence and the stuff he does. We can even think of iWeb and some of the stuff that he brings to the table. And when we heard that this bill had the potential to impact the artists, we thought, well, we must let the artists know, because as Lynette said, you guys are so busy carrying out your craft, writing songs and going to the studio. You don't have time to pull up a 37-page document and read it to see all the details. So the least we thought we could do is to pull the critical elements out and present it to you. And I want to thank Caswell again and Lynette for so ably explaining and going into detail with examples of how it could affect you, the artist. I want to thank Sean as well for agreeing as well on short notice to host this panel discussion with you, the artists. And thank you, the artists, for coming. Those who are artists and those who are not artists, I don't know who's who here, but I'm assuming that some of you are artists and cultural practitioners, and some of you may not. But you may have friends and have family who are in that area, or you might know people, and you can help disseminate this information to them. So thank you all for coming. And the last thing I want to say before we close is, Lynette, thank you for that shimmer, that ray of hope that you lifted up by saying that the artists can rebel. In other words, as the Trinidadians, what you're effectively saying was that the Trinidadians, they did not allow the government to dictate what they did on stage. And they went on and did what they had to do. And eventually, it became pervasive that they were able to sing what they needed to sing. So I want to encourage the artists and the cultural practitioners, as Lynette said again, if this is your craft, do your craft. And the other side I would say is that there's the organization that Sean stands for, BACA, which is an association that is intent on representing the artists. So I see a heightened role for BACA in supporting artists who dare to go against the status quo and help protect them. So on that note, I want to say thanks to everyone. Thanks, Lynette. Again, thanks, Caswell. Thanks, Sean. Thanks to Lisa and Kathy, for everyone who worked in the background to put up the images and the information. Thanks to everyone for participating. And I wish you a pleasant and a restful night. This is going to be on YouTube. We're going to put it up on YouTube so that you can send you the link so you can disseminate it further to other artists. Once again, thank you and have a very good night. God bless.
Good night.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks to all who
So can I say very
Good
quickly,
night.
thanks
Thank
to
you.
Dave for facilitating. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, have a good night, guys. And remember, once it's up on YouTube, the bill has not been passed as yet, so feel free to share. Don't be intimidated.
Oh, just quickly,
Mhm.
Caswell has great insight and memory about how this thing is going to happen. So he said, you know, they're going to send a report, and are we ready for that? Because we would have to be ready for that. If we don't just want it to pass by sleight of hand, because it would kind of like all that you've done before would be for naught. So I think we have to be conscious and aware of what is to happen when this report comes.
Very
And I
much.
think Caswell can help us with that. So I just wanted to get that in. Thanks.
Yeah, I
So we need
mean,
to come together again.
based on the amendments that are made, as Antoinette is requesting in the chat, she's requesting that we have a repeat or a part two. And I would say based on the amendment that are made, then I for sure would be more than willing to join with the team to facilitate a part two of the discussion that we had tonight. So again, thanks guys, and have a good night and a great remainder of the week.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.